welcome to the Nonfiction Authors Association webinar series. These webinars are carefully designed to teach you what you need to know about writing, publishing, and promoting your nonfiction books. Whether you're listening live or on one of our social channels like Facebook, YouTube, or Vimeo, turn up the volume, set your monitor to full screen mode, and prepare to immerse yourself in this valuable learning experience. Now on to the webinar.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on how to decide if you're going to DIY your book publicity or if you're going to hire a publicist. And this is a question that I get asked often, because it's a big decision. And so what we're going to focus on today is how do you make that decision? And hang on one second, because I want to share my screen with all of you and make sure that works. We've had a little bit of a challenge this morning, but challenges are really great. Challenges kind of show you where you are with things. Here we go. By the way, we will take questions later on near the end of this. And so mark them down and let us know what you're thinking about as we go through this. So let me go ahead and share the slides. All righty. Almost there. Okay. All right, I've been really looking forward to this presentation and being with you all today. DIY or hire a professional publicist? It's a big question. Again, it's one that's asked quite frequently. My company is McCall Media Group. I do a lot of work with the Nonfiction Authors Association, a fantastic group of people. And I just want to say, I know many of you are not members yet. Some of you are members. It's definitely something to consider because when it comes to writing a book, publishing a book, marketing a book, publicizing a book, there's a lot of pieces and a lot that goes into that. And so when you're with a group of people who know how to do these things, it just cuts the amount of time and effort in half, truly. Maybe more. I don't know. It's a lot, though. So do you DIY or bring in a professional publicist? And I love this picture. I love both of them. One, this is me a lot. It's like, what should we do here? And the other one looks sort of like a Jackie O photo. I don't know any publicist who looks like that, but I kind of like the photo, so I decided to throw it in here today. So the answer to which choice you should make really depends on you, your book, and several other factors. Oh, and let me just share with you, why should I be even presenting this today? So it's good for you to understand I have a little bit of credibility, and I'll just quickly share some of those points. One is that I'm a media insider. My first career was in radio broadcasting, and it was through that I had a talk show. I interviewed authors all the time. I didn't intentionally pick authors, but I love books, I love authors, I love reading. And you know what else? I love the fact that you can buy a book for whatever price point, whether it's $14.95 to $24.95 or anywhere in between, and get someone's life's work, or at least a big significant part of their life's work that's full of all kinds of information. And I mean, it's just the best deal in town in my book. So anyway, I love authors. I have a proven track record. I've been doing this for over 2 decades, so I've been around a little while. I do have a spot on my website, which is my name. It says Success Stories, if anybody was curious. I've worked with some really amazing people I'm really honored at some of the things that they've said, so I just want to mention that. I have extensive book publicity experience, again, over 2 decades, media training experience and expertise. And this is important because it's one thing to get the interview, it's another thing to deliver. And when you get an interview, whether it's a podcast, a radio show, television, an online program of some sort with video, you have to be able to deliver your key messages, but also in a way that's entertaining or interesting and compelling and invites people to continue to listen to you. And there's a real art to that. I have a passion for empowering authors. Of course, I love authors. I am one. I've written my own books. I have another one on the back burner that I'm just starting to work on. And so I can relate with what you're doing and with this whole process because it is a process. There's no question about it. So there are 3 main elements when it comes to making this decision. Should you do it yourself or should you hire someone to help you with it? There are more than 3 elements, but these 3 are critical and they show up in every combination. It's time, budget, and relationships. These are the 3 main elements. So let's start with do it yourself. For the pros, what are the pros to doing it yourself? One is it's budget friendly, right? You're not paying anybody to actually do the work, and that's good on the pocketbook for sure. You get to decide how you spend your time. You can, today I think I'll work on writing my pitch letters, or today I think I'll research the best media for me to pitch for my book, or today I'll work on whatever. You get to decide, and you don't have to run that by anybody else or collaborate with anybody. It's all up to you. You get to build relationships with media. And this is a really great one because you're writing a book or you have a book now. You may write future books, right? Or you may do some other product, or you may have an event in the future, or you may volunteer for a nonprofit organization and decide to help them with their media because you know how to do it. So this is a very generative, these skills are very generative. You learn that now with your book currently, but you can be using it in the future in all kinds of different ways. You have flexibility when you do it yourself. You can make changes on the fly. Let's say you're working on a particular campaign and a big news story breaks, and you realize, oh, this is something I can speak to. You can make that shift and change the kind of pitch you're doing. You don't have a team that you have to go to and say, hey, we're changing things and it's going to take a couple days. You can change it right now. So that flexibility is a nice thing. You'll have full control of your messaging. It's up to you what you say. It's up to you what you decide is the most important points of your book, of your work. You get to say. And of course, it's a learning experience without a doubt, because you will definitely learn as you go through this process when you're doing it yourself. So we've looked at the pros. Let's take a look at some of the cons to this decision. It's a time suck, okay? You're learning another job. It definitely takes time to figure out the media, to write your pitch letters, to go through the whole process of pitching and following up and setting up and all of that. So definitely time is involved there. If you're new to this, it's a lack of expertise. You learn as you do things, right? So if you're just starting something, then there's a lack of expertise. A lack of relationships. Those media contacts we spoke of a moment ago, you may not have them yet. In fact, you probably don't if you're just starting. You'll have a limited reach. So when you're working with someone else, like a publicist, they've been out there doing this and they know of other platforms. In fact, something I run across quite a lot is that there are authors that they're familiar with so many media outlets. Usually it's the top tier. Oh, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the top ones, they'll be familiar with those. Or a business author might know of Fast Company, Inc., Business Insider, Wall Street Journal, and then that's about it. But the truth is, the media opportunities go way beyond that. And you have a limited reach if you're only really familiar with the ones you're familiar with, whereas someone else has gone out there and discovered other things. And let me give you one little tip. If someone really wants to be in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, for example, those are big ego hits. I mean, it's a big deal. It is. When you're in one of those publications, it says something about you. People know it. Oh, you're in the New York Times. There's no question. Millions of subscribers and readers. On the other hand, there could be, say, a trade association that maybe has 40,000 subscribers, far fewer than the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. However, those 40,000 are all going to be interested in what you have because you're speaking exactly the kind of thing that they're interested in. Whereas New York Times or Wall Street Journal, people pick and choose what they're going to read. And what you have to offer doesn't speak to everybody. This is just kind of how it is. The point being that while we love the big ego hits, something much smaller that maybe you aren't that familiar with can actually serve you better. And this is important to know. So it's a con when you don't know that. Now you do, though. See, pressure. There's some pressure. If you're doing it yourself, you're going to feel like, oh, it isn't happening fast enough. Should it be happening faster? I don't know. What's the process? Does it normally take this long? The answer is probably yes, by the way. It does come in waves. I will say that. But you don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. There's a potential for burnout. It can get a little bit frustrating when you're not getting the kind of feedback that you want and think that you should be getting. And I get it. I totally get it. There's a potential for mistakes, which is always the case when we're learning something new. And a lack of tools. There are many tools out there that can make this work easier, but if you haven't done it, you don't really know the tools. And taking it a step further, when it comes to all those tools, you have to figure out what works well with you? What do you like? Because there'll be some that you don't like. I've tried lots of different things, and some of them I've played with for a while, and I've thought, oh, I hate this, and I get rid of it and find something else. But then when I lock into something I love, I am in there. And I'm sure the same is true for you, but you don't know all the tools if you're really just kind of starting. So that's a con when it comes to doing it yourself. So let's move to the other side of the equation. And now we're going to talk about hiring a publicist. So this is having someone help you out, the pros. Time savings for sure, because you're giving that piece to someone else, right? That's going to definitely save time and allow you to do other things, such as maybe you want to be doing speaking engagements. That's a great way to make extra money. If you do a keynote for anywhere from, I don't know, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. Some people make a lot of money doing keynotes. That's a way to bring in money, particularly when all the expenses that go into doing a book, et cetera. If you're only counting on book sales, you have to sell a lot of books. So it's another way to bring in another revenue stream. So you have time to focus in on that when someone else is doing the pitching and writing all the materials for you. That's what the point I'm wanting to make. Or you might be setting up bookstore events, which I know a lot of people say bookstore events are dead, but I have to tell you, I have had some great success with them. Much of it depends on the book, the location, what are you doing, what time of year, all of that comes into play. When you have a publicist, you're really hiring them for their relationships. That's, I would say, there's their expertise. There's other things too, but the relationships are a big deal. So doing this for over 2 decades, there are people that I can contact pretty quickly and get an answer about something, whether it's a yes, which of course we love, or it's a no. At least I can move on if it's a no. You're not hanging in limbo forever. You can get an answer quickly. You're getting relationships with people when you hire them to help you out with it. There's a broader reach. We addressed this a little bit earlier. When a publicist has been out there and they're familiar with a lot more media outlets than someone who has not done that. It just makes sense. You're hiring them for their professional expertise. And sometimes you need someone, you might have some great ideas, fantastic ideas, and you might have some ideas that seem really good to you, but maybe they wouldn't play out so well when they're out there in the real world. And when you have someone else who has played with a lot of these things, they can give you valuable feedback, save you time, save you energy, save you money possibly. So that's a very helpful piece. They help with strategic planning, of course. What can we do here to make this as rewarding and valuable as possible? I like to suggest to authors to always go a year out at least. So where do you want to be in a year? And then kind of reverse engineer it. And you can decide the different campaigns you want to do. Maybe you want to do a podcasting campaign. Maybe you want to do gift catalogs. Maybe you want to do whatever it is. You get to plan when you can do that or when you want to do that and when it makes the most sense. Which brings us to newsjacking, which, by the way, is a term I don't like. I just don't like it. However, it doesn't matter if I like it or not. It's one that's used quite a lot. And what it means is that there's a breaking news story, late breaking news story, and your expertise, you can speak to whatever is happening in that news story. So let's go through this a little bit because I think it's an important one. Well, first of all, it's not new. It's been around forever. I've been doing this over 2 decades, and from the day I started, newsjacking, although it wasn't called that, was definitely happening. It's kind of a normal thing, to tell you the truth. But what's really critical with this is the timing. So this is an important piece for you to remember. When it comes to newsjacking a story, so there's a big story that's in the news, and you have an expertise that can speak to that. But you don't want to pitch it on the first day. You don't want to pitch it when the story is breaking. And here's why. When the story is breaking, the journalists, the producers, whoever's working on it, they're just interested in getting the story on the air. They're just interested in the timing, getting the facts correct, getting the timeline correct. That's what they're looking at. They're not looking at the fact that a psychologist or psychiatrist or someone could come in and comment on the states of mind people might be in after this big disaster or whatever it is. That would come a little later. So what I suggest you do is that you monitor the news and then just pay attention to when it shifts from the factual, here's the story, here's what's happening, to let's talk to so-and-so who can comment on this story. That's where you want to be. You want to be like the second level, the one-off story. This is what you're looking for. It's the sweet spot. Because the other end of the timing is you don't want to be too late, meaning the news cycle changes pretty fast usually, although some stories will stick around for a while. And you don't want to come in a week later or a month later and say, I can comment on this when we've moved way beyond that. And they're going to look at you and say, well, you missed the boat, or where have you been? That kind of thing. So timing is crucial. Not too soon, and you don't want to be too late. And it's a sensitivity. There's a sensitivity in that. So it's also not the time to go in and say, by the way, I have a book. Yes, you have a book. Yes, it will be in there, but you don't lead with it. The book actually gives you credibility that you are the person to talk about this. And that's what it gives you. And often they'll mention, oh, and the author of such and such a book, that will be mentioned. But again, you want to be sensitive to all of that. And the fact that if you're commenting after some sort of disaster or breaking news story, that there's a lot, people are hurt, there's things going on, you want to be sensitive to that. Relevance. Now, this speaks to your own audience because you already have your own networks, right? We all are doing social media. We're all building our networks and our email list. When you do a news story, you're part of a newsjacking, if you will. It needs to make sense to your current audience as to why you would be speaking to this story. So there needs to be an alignment there. And then the backlash potential, it's there. I mean, people say a lot of things on social media, as we all know. So it's just something to be aware of. It can happen, but certainly don't worry about that. So let's move to the cons of hiring a publicist. Okay, this is the other piece of that. Budget, of course, is the first one because you're going to pay for that. Time is also an element. I said earlier that you get to save time because you're handing this over to someone else, and that's true. But they still need you to be a part of the equation. So when they write the materials, they're going to have to run it by you and say, well, what do you think? Does this fit? And you'll need to look at it. Or they may be talking to a journalist who is working on a story and they're interested in you and they send, I don't know, 4 questions for you to answer via email. And your publicist sends, oops, hey, stop that. Oop, hey, hang on. See, another surprise. Yay. They're going to send you things that you need to take some time and do. And what I'm just trying to make here or point out here is that sometimes if you're knee deep in something and you're being asked to do a little something over here, can be a little irritating, but just expect it. It's going to happen sometimes. And if you have someone doing this for you, you're still the expert. You still are the author. You are the one who wrote this book and it's your information. So they need to get it right from you. So I just want to add that piece. This is a con also. You don't have the opportunity to build a relationship with the media person, at least not so much. If it's a podcast host, you'll meet when you do the podcast and there'll be an exchange and that can be a really wonderful thing. But you've missed all the time before leading up to the podcast, which the publicist would do. So it's kind of a missed opportunity to build more of a relationship. It's not like a big deal, but it is a con, and I want to point it out. You can become dependent on someone doing this for you, which is nice. There's a pro to that because you've got someone doing it for you, but it can be a con because at some point you may have to take it over and there's an adjustment there. A potential misalignment. You could hire the wrong person. It sometimes happens. You need someone who aligns and gets you. You need someone who gets you. That's really the bottom line. When I first started my business, I look at several factors. I have a list of 5 things I look for when I consider working with someone. I suggest you do something similar. And for me, I'll just name a couple. One is, do I love the material? So if I'm going to work with someone, I have to love what they've written. Right? I mean, it has to make sense. The second thing is, do I believe media will love the material? Because if I don't think media is going to love the material, there's no way I'm going to do it. It would be unethical. And I just wouldn't do it. The third is the author mediagenic. And if not, are they willing to get trained? So that comes to that media training thing. You can get interviews, but if you can't deliver, that's a problem. And then the fourth is, do I have chemistry with the person? Because I think that's important too. So I suggest that you have your own list of how you will know that someone lines up with you and that'll be and sometimes mistakes happen and then we adjust as quickly as we can. And then another con is you have shared control. So it isn't all what you say. Granted, you're the final decision maker, but there'll be a collaborative process there. So you may want to do something and your publicist might say, it might be better if we do it this way. And here's why. And that can be a great thing. but I'm just letting you know it can be a con too, because you got to work it out with someone else. So those are the pros and cons of both. If you do it yourself, or if you decide to hire someone, and those are all valid points to really consider and to think about what really works for you. DIY or hire a pro. But is there a third option? And the answer is yes. Doesn't this look like a blonde Maria Shriver? It does to me. Maybe, I don't know. It does to me. I love the picture. Just she looks happy. I love third options. I think third options are a wonderful thing. But before I get into it, this is a good time if you have questions. We've been through some material now. Something might not be clear, or maybe I didn't answer something that you really want to know the answer to. There's a Q&A box where you can jot those down. I'm hopeful that Caitlin will stick around and help me with that, but I won't put her on the spot either. But I'll say, Caitlin, I hope you're going to help me with this, but we'll see. We'll get your questions answered. Don't worry. Not that you're worried. Okay, what is that third option? Let's take a look at it here. I call it the do-it-yourself plus. Do-it-yourself plus. All right, so what is that? It's a hybrid model. We've heard of hybrid models. In fact, Stephanie, I think she just did a webinar or a class on different types of publishing, whether you get a publisher or you do your self-publishing or you do a hybrid publisher. Hybrid is definitely a model, even in cars. Lots of people getting hybrid cars. The Publicity Master course is a hybrid of the two. If you think of book publicity as a continuum, so on one end, you're just starting, you don't really know, you don't know the process. And on the other end, you've got someone who's been doing it a while. And I have the arrow continuing on because my own belief is you never really arrive. You can always be better at something, always. Even if you're a fantastic artist, you can always be a little bit better. Improvement might be incremental, but it can always be a little bit better. And actually, when you think about technology and how things are always changing anyway, there's always room for improvement. It'll be forced on you if nothing else. You've got to stay with it. But anyway, so this is the continuum, the DIY plus or the Publicity Master course. I would put just to the left of the middle. So you got the middle, and just to the left of that a little bit is where it would be. And here's why. Because you're not starting at zero. I don't know this process at all. So you kind of skip being a beginner. You're moving up. You already know the process because through this course, we go through how do you pitch media? Where do you find the contact info? What's a good pitch letter? What are sound bites? What do you mean? What do we do? How do we pitch? How do I follow up? There's a lot of questions. And if you're a beginner, that's a lot to answer. I tell you what, I wish they would have had a course like this 20 years ago when I started because I had to make every mistake in the book and learn as I went. And so part of this is I'm just going to share with you all my secrets because I love to do that. I think that's fun. I really do. Okay, so you skip being a beginner. You'll have instant expertise. Now, you don't have yet the expertise of actually doing the pitching and the learning that comes from that, but you're well on your way. And it gives you confidence because you just know how the process works. There's a certain amount of confidence that comes with that. And that will come across, by the way. I've been producing a podcast for 7 years, and I get pitched all the time. And I can tell people who haven't done it before. It's easy. It's really easy. And you can tell the ones who have been around a while. It comes across. There's cost savings. It helps your budget. And think about it because it's far less than hiring a professional publicist to do the work for you. And it saves you from doing it yourself where you wouldn't have to pay anything, but you pay a lot of time. So if you're going to learn it yourself, that's going to take a lot of time. So what is your time worth? If we could get you somewhere in the middle on that continuum, right? Let's say it's 50 hours. What's 50 hours worth? Might even be more. But how much is your time worth? So that's the question there. You have an expert to rely on. Me. It's not that I know everything, but I know a lot. I've been around a while. I mean, living a while and doing things for a while teaches you quite a bit. It's a great thing. Skill development, there's no question you'll develop skills. Absolutely. You'll build long-term connections, not only with media, which we've talked about, but within the group, because there's something very bonding about going through this together. Ongoing resourcefulness. I made mention of this a little bit earlier, but these skills will be generative to many different things that you could do in the future. Whether you have future books, projects, anything, an event that you want to promote in the media, you'll have those skills. I mean, they're transferable, they're resourceful. And then customizable strategies. This is something else that we'll go through. You just check on the time real quick. Good, we're doing good. Customizable strategies. So let's take a look at some of those. When we're together in the group, we can talk about we'll be talking about your books and what it is you want to do in your vision and how can we get you there. So here's just a quick example. I have 3 examples. Mike Glauser is an author. He's been a client of mine since 1999, if you can believe that. He's written a number of books. 10 years ago, he did a bicycle trip following the Trans-America bike tour trip. I can't remember the exact title of it now, but it goes from Florence, Oregon to Yorktown, Virginia. It's 4,000 miles. He did that 10 years ago. And on that trip, he interviewed entrepreneurs all along the way about being on Main Street. What did they design? How did they do this? That whole thing. And then a book came out of that about a year and a half later. A book was published. My job was, as they went on this trip, was to line up media interviews all along the way. So I knew where they were going to be each day, and I would set up morning TV shows and journalists and reporters all along the route to talk to him. So 10 years later, which was this summer, he did the trip again, and it was on pedaling to end poverty. There'll be a book coming out probably in about a year and a half, and they're doing a documentary film as well. So he did the 4,000-mile trip again. Here they are, they're dipping their tires in the Pacific Ocean, and then they're in the Atlantic on the right. So again, I did media all along the route as they're traveling the route. It was great. But here's the thing. I was testing different hooks to grab people, to grab journalists, to see what they would want to talk about, and producers. And the one that really captured them, and see if this captures you. So Mike is 70. He's 70 years old, and he was biking 100 miles a day for 40 days. So I would say, hey, do you think you could ride a bike for 100 miles a day? Oh, I don't know. I could probably do 30. I said, well, okay, try 100 miles a day for 40 days. And Mike's 70. Oh, they loved it. Oh, they ate it up. He did morning TV all along the route, and it was just great. The point of this is, whatever your book is, there are strategies and things to come up with in order to get you to start a movement or whatever it is you want to do. Maybe it isn't that ambitious that you want to do. And by ambitious, I just mean that's very active. 40 days biking 4,000 miles is very active. You may not want to do that, but there are other possibilities. So let's look at another one. This is Science of Parenthood. Noreen Dworkin and Jessica Ziegler wrote this book. And so we did something really different for them. We did house parties or home parties, kind of like Mary Kay or Arbonne or the MLM companies where you go and do candle parties and that sort of thing. You know what I'm talking about? So we set it up like that. And each of them have friends around the country. We'd set it up where they'd do a party there. They'd invite all their friends. Noreen and Jessica would do a presentation. They'd all drink wine, of course, because a little wine doesn't hurt when it comes to selling books. And then they would share stories, parenting stories. And by the end of the night, I bought several books, each of them. So they buy one book for themselves, but then they would buy gifts. This was very successful. But in addition to that, in each city, we would set up a public event. So whether it was a bookstore signing or something at the library or a community center or a church, there would be some public event so that when we did media, whether it was morning TV or any kind of media, we had a place to invite people to come. I mean, really can't invite people to people's homes. That doesn't work. So we would set up a public event, and it just worked beautifully. Did it all around the country. And it eventually led to Noreen being on Dr. Oz. That started with, he did a social media tweet. I think it was on Twitter. X now, but it was Twitter then. And then ended up being on the show a little bit later. There's a whole process to getting national TV, by the way, which is something we would talk about. One more. This is Darlene Price, and she's an executive coach. And the strategy we used for her was very simple. They can be elaborate, they can be simple. This one was, I would get her in the top business magazines, Wall Street Journal, Business Insider, Inc., Fast Company, Forbes, the top tier ones. And she had the goods she could deliver. We'd set that up. We'd take the link, we'd put it in her newsletter. And here's the thing. See, her newsletter was made up of the right people. It was made up of the people who would hire her to either come in and do executive coaching for the CEO or someone in the C-suite, or to come in and do a workshop, a company-wide workshop, or to come in and do a company-wide talk. And they paid her good money for this. And the first time we did it, and I think it was the Wall Street Journal. I mean, we started at the top, which is really great when that happens. So we got the link in there. She ran it in her newsletter. In the first week, she signed a contract for $75,000. This strategy worked. I said, well, you more than paid for me. So that worked really well. So the point is that whatever your book is, whatever your vision is, whatever it is you want to do, there's a way to make it work. But you need to have ideas. And when you talk to other people, it can really help to do that. So let me just share with you the Book Publicity Master Course, which is just a fun 6-week course. On the left, I have the who, what, where, when, why, which is kind of the structure for journalists when they're writing a news story. So it's you and me in the Nonfiction Authors Association. We're going to get together. It's a 6-week course with a live element that happens on Tuesdays. It will be recorded, of course. It's 60 to 90 minutes each session. They will be recorded. So if you can't be there for whatever reason, you have a commitment or something comes up, you will get the recording, but we'll also have a Facebook group where we'll be connecting and talking. So if you listen to that recording and you have a question, you can come in the group and still get an answer. So that live element is still there. So you don't have to worry about that. I just love that part of it. Anyway, it will be on Zoom, of course. You all know how to do Zoom because here we are. It begins next Tuesday, that's September 24th. It runs for 6 Tuesdays in a row until October 29th. And the reason is because it's fun. Your book is important. You want to get your message out there. And because DIY Plus is affordable compared to a lot of other things. And doing it yourself is a lot of work. So this will really help you. And then just quickly, you'll learn how to craft pitches that get results, hooks and sound bites and stories. Oh my. How to capture media attention, which is the name of the game, I'll tell you. How to find contacts. How do you find who you need, who your target audience is? How do you find the gatekeepers to your target audience is really the better way to say it. I learned to deliver interviews like a pro and become a media darling. I have a whole module on the media training. That in itself is good stuff, if I say so myself. And you'll learn to leverage those interviews in ways that you never thought of before. You get an interview and most people think, oh, I'll share it on social media. I'll put it in my newsletter, but they have no idea where else to use it. And we'll be talking about that because there are other ways to use it. Oh, one other thing. I have a special gift. And if you decide to join me before midnight tonight Pacific time, you'll get a copy of Media Darling. That's my book, and it's all about how to deliver great interviews. It was so much fun to write it. And yeah, I'll give that. And by the way, quite a few people signed up for this course when the Nonfiction Authors Association sent out a promo that it was coming up. Quite a few people signed up. So you'll get a copy too. I don't want you to worry that because you're not doing it today, you won't. You will, because I know who you are. And I think that's it. Oh, these are my dogs. I had to include them. How could I not? This is Susie Q on the left. She's a rescue. And that's Jimmy Jam on the right. And they say, be bold, go for it, and join our mom. I don't know. I don't know if they said that or not. Probably not. So it's time to take some questions. Here's my contact info if you want to reach out to me at some point. And Caitlin, are you with us? I think I
I
heard your
am,
mic.
so I can go ahead and read off the questions if you would like.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the share though. Okay. Yes,
All right.
let's go for it.
So Pat has 2 questions. First of all, what makes the ideal client, especially if one is a former marketing profession who has no time? And they also wanted to see how you avoid getting assigned the most junior associate at a PR firm as a new author.
Wow. Those are such good questions, you guys. I wasn't expecting that. That's wonderful. I would say the ideal client, we'll start with that one. The ideal client is someone who knows their stuff and they have some confidence about their material, which I'm sure that's true of everyone here. If you take the time to write a book, you have confidence. I think the second part of that question was, especially if one is a former marketing profession who has no time. That's a good one. So in fact, I have a client now who has no time. I mean, he's just always slammed. So we've figured out a rhythm that works. And this is what I would suggest working with anyone, particularly really busy. With him, we do like a weekly thing. I'll save up everything I need from him, send him one email, and we agree that I send it out on Friday afternoon and he looks at it over the weekend and then sends me whatever I need. So that's just one example. So the ideal client is someone who's got great material, really wants to get out there and do this, and then is willing to figure out a way to work together that works for everybody. So was there another question, Caitlin, or did I cover it?
The second question that they had was how to avoid getting assigned the most junior associate at a PR firm as a new author.
Yeah, that's a good one because I've seen that many times. Well, I would talk to my editor because they, or my agent. The agent might be able to help with that. Part of who you get assigned to is they look at how much money they're going to put into marketing also. That can enter into it. I don't know that there's a way to absolutely avoid it. If you can hire someone else to help with that, that would be good. If you can't, then see what you can do with this junior publicist. One thing I do know about working with publishing houses, especially bigger ones, is that you want to inform them of everything you're doing, like once a week, and have it a big email with, I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, because it puts it back on them that they need to be doing stuff too. What happens all too often is authors will send each individual email and sometimes several a day, and that just doesn't go over very well. But if you do it all together, and it's a pretty significant thing, it puts some pressure back on them. So that would be my answer to that. Does anyone want to go live, Caitlin? If they want to have an exchange here, that would be okay with me. They can raise their hand if they want to.
Okay.
How's that? Yeah.
We can go ahead and do that.
Okay. So
All
if you
right.
want any more and want to say something, please raise your hand and we'll take a look at that. Anything else?
We do have a few more questions.
Good.
The next question that we have, is it common to hire someone for just a month or two and then go it alone?
I would say that is uncommon. That is uncommon. And the reason is when you hire someone, the first thing they have to do is get knee deep into your material. They have to read your book. They have to understand who you are. They have to look over everything you're doing, have an interview with you and discuss it. That right there takes some time to put together. Usually, a minimum contract is 3 months. And often people want 6. If you're hiring someone else, they often want to go for 6. This is just because it takes a while to get everything going. And when you start pitching, it takes a while to actually land the interviews. And then often they're booking out a ways. This is something you need to take into consideration, particularly if you do it yourself, that usually there's a lead time to anything that you would send out. By the way, if anybody wants to do a holiday thing, you should be doing it now. You should be preparing and getting it together now. I just want to mention that because I often have people come in December. Well, can we do something for the holidays? And it's like, yeah, it's a little late. You can do it with your own lists. You can do it with your own network. Yes, you can do that. But to get into media, it would take a little time. So generally, a minimum contract is usually 3 months.
Thank you. So next question we have is from Maggie, who asks, have you worked with people who have disabilities and are mediagenic but have limited energy?
Oh, I have. Yes, I have, as a matter of fact. And what we did was we just had just a conversation about what would work for her. It was a woman in this case. And we had a conversation about when her energy level was the best and how much she thought she could do. And then we worked within that. So the answer is yes. And you can definitely, again, that comes to hiring really the right person that understands what you're doing and what's going on. So,
Thank you.
uh-huh.
So we have a few budget questions.
Good.
So the first one that we have is from Stuart, who asked what sort of budget?
Is this for hiring someone? Is that what we're
I-
talking about?
The first question, I believe,
Probably.
yes, but then we also have some that kind of delve more into hiring versus the hybrid route. So that's a separate question as well.
Okay. So budget wise, it runs the gamut depending on who you want to go with. And a lot of publicists now are specializing in certain areas. Like you can find someone who only does podcasts, and you can find someone who only does reviews, and you can find someone who only does radio. There's still someone who just does radio and she's quite successful. So that's part of it. Or you can hire a publicist who kind of covers all the bases where they do all those different things and you might have multiple campaigns. Generally speaking, and I'm being general here because you really have to seek out, you have to figure out what it is you want and then find someone who provides that and then have a conversation because it really does run the gamut. But generally, when you're hiring someone else, I haven't really seen it. Maybe it's just podcasting. They might have something for 1,000 a month or 995 a month and do a retainer sort of thing and guarantee so many podcasts for that. And then it can go anywhere from that up to 5,000 a month if it's a really detailed campaign and you're going into a lot of different places and having them do a lot of different things. So much of it depends on how big the project is. I know that isn't real definite, but you got a lot of people doing a lot of different things. So you have to decide what you want and then go find them.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
Jan asked about projects, so budget broken down by project, but I believe your question may have touched on that. If not, Jan, can you maybe let us know in the chat and we can elaborate further?
Oh, by project. Yeah, like someone hiring you to do 10 podcasts or something like that.
Yeah, so I'm thinking
Yeah.
kind of like milestones, if you will, is how I'm taking that. So, or maybe just for certain aspects of publicity.
Yeah, there's definitely people who do per project fees and those who do retainer. The thing about retainer is you can't, it adds that flexibility. So there's a retainer amount, but it can be directed at whatever they decide at any given time. If there's a newsjacking story, you can shift everything and go after that. Whereas when you do a project fee, it's well defined. You're going to do this for this. And then it goes on until that's accomplished. So there's, and the beauty of that is you have a set budget, you know what you want, and then you ask for it and set that up. I can see doing that.
Awesome.
Yep.
So Jan also has another question. What is the difference between publicity and marketing? They sound like there's some overlap.
There is. Marketing, really, publicity kind of falls under marketing. And another way to define it is marketing generally is geared towards sales, setting things up so that sales happen, whereas publicity is much more about awareness. It's much more about being out there, being visible, search terms, people find you, they see you. Is very often when you discover a book or you discover someone you think is interesting, you might see them 4, 5, 6, 7 times and then choose to buy their book or then choose to do something. So we need to see something or hear about something so many times before we're willing to take action. So marketing is more sales oriented and publicity is more awareness. I think another good example is if you go to a party and you walk into a party and there's a group of people and they're all talking and you walk into the group and you say, hey, I'm so and so, you really should know me, I'm really terrific, I'm someone you should get to know, I'm a great person, I'm really good at this. And that's more sales, marketing, advertising, and they're saying it. Whereas publicity is more, you walk into a party and there's a group of people there and someone sees you walk in and leans over to the person next to him and says, you see that person, you really ought to get to know them. I think they'd be fantastic for your business and for your book, and you should talk to them. That's different. That's different. It's like word of mouth. It's like reviews. We're more willing to listen to reviews than an ad, because we all know ads. Next question. Or do you want me to, Caitlin, you can always tell me if you think I should say more about it. You can always invite me to.
Will do. Next question is, if their book isn't published yet, when do they start planning for publicity?
Oh my gosh, you know what? You know the perfect answer to that? You should plan for publicity when you get the idea for the book. That would be ideal. That would be ideal. But let's say you're already writing it. So in the question, sorry, Caitlin, in the question, was she saying that she's finished the book? What did she say?
Saying it
Or
isn't
he
published yet.
isn't published yet. Okay. Okay. Now think about your vision. Where do you want it to be? What would you most love to have happen? And then when it comes down to the actual mechanics of it, if you have a publisher, there are like long lead magazines and long lead other media that require 6 months before a publication date. And then there are others like the industry trades that would be Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, Kirkus Review, Book List, those. They require anywhere from 2 to 4 months, sometimes 5. Each one's a little bit different. So it's in advance. And in that, prior to your publication date, that's when you want to set up any interviews that you want to do. And ideally, it would be great if they line up right about at your publication date. So you have just a great launch. Start sooner. In fact, if you're waiting for your book to get published, now is the time to start putting that together.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So before we move on to the next question, someone asked if you could possibly put the contact info back up. And Maggie, we can go ahead and include that in the replay email as well.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, you want me to do that? I can do that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, if you have it available, and then I'll toss it in the email as well.
Yeah. I think it's right on that slide, so that'll be nice. There it is. It's magic.
Thank you so much. So next question I have
Yeah.
is, what's the author's financial benefits when using a publicist, not using one, or a DIY, and also hybrid, they put in parentheses.
Well, I tried to address that with the different budget concerns when I spoke of Darlene Price. So it depends. Do you just, if it depends on if you're hoping just for book sales to make money from book sales, or if you also have some other way that you want to create a revenue stream. That could be through speaking, coaching, consulting, some other revenue stream. So when you get publicity, it can help you with that. Like the case with Darlene, where we got a story in the Wall Street Journal, included it in her newsletter, and she made 75 grand that first week. So the financial rewards can be great. Doing it yourself, you can definitely get media coverage for sure. I love to say it's not rocket science or brain surgery. It's just a matter of relationships and figuring out how to get people interested in what you have. And then you get the visibility. And then on your website or whatever, you might have sales of whatever you're selling. Maybe it's your book, maybe it's workshops, or you're selling other things. I don't know if I'm answering the question directly enough. If she wants to join us, that's fine. And we can talk about it further. Did that make sense, Caitlin?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And if it didn't answer the question, maybe she can put it in the chat and we can do that because we do have a few more if you're okay with it, a few other questions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. So the next one is, do contracts include any success metrics? And if so, can you give a few examples?
Some do. Some do. Yeah. If you do a project fee and you agree on a certain amount of money and they're going to get 10 podcasts for you, they keep going until they get the 10 podcasts or 20 or whatever it is that you've agreed to. So, yes, there can be metrics. That said, it's very difficult to guarantee results. Sometimes you can pitch and pitch the ideal media outlets, and for whatever reason, they're not interested at that point in time. And that can be everything from, we just covered that, so we're not going to be covering that for another 6 months, or they're just not interested. And sometimes it's a real mystery. I've had times where there was a book that was perfect for an outlet, and for whatever reason, they just didn't want to go for it. So we just kept on with other possibilities. I'd love to tell you that there are guarantees. There are outlets that will give you a feature story for $20,000. You can't go that route, but I personally, I think that's outrageous, but they are out there. And there are people who have that kind of budget and can afford it. And they would rather do that than do the work it takes to figure out what your interesting key messages are, pitch them in such a way that it gets someone's interest. I mean, there's a lot to it. It's not brain surgery, like I said, but it definitely is an art. It's definitely an art. And there's a bit of psychology thrown in there too. But yeah, that would be my answer to that.
Thank you. The next one that you have is, where do you recommend looking for a publicist? Is there a good place to start if you're new to this?
Yes, I would become a member of the Nonfiction Authors Association for one thing, because a lot of them, or any other writing or author group, will have recommendations and probably know people. That's one thing. Another is to look through your own books, because very often in the acknowledgments, they'll thank their publicist. I'm in quite a few books, which is really kind of fun. And if it's your genre, all the better, because they work in that genre. You can do a simple search and see what comes up through Google or whatever search engine you want to use and see what comes up. You could take a look at a book that's similar to yours, see what media they've gotten, and see if you can track down the person that way. Because some authors will put on their contact page for media inquiries, contact so and they'll list the publicist's name and contact info. So that's another way. When it comes to, I just want to include an aside here. When it comes to being in writers groups and authors groups, sometimes when you pose the question, like, should I get a publicist or what about book publicity? Sometimes people will come back and say, it doesn't work, don't bother. And I just want to offer this, that sometimes that's more a reflection of their own experience than it is about book publicity in general. Because I've been doing this a long time and I can tell you from my experience, it does work. But some people, maybe they get a misalignment. They hire someone who isn't quite right for them, or maybe they tried doing it themselves and just maybe didn't give it enough time, didn't have enough expertise, didn't have enough experience to start making things happen. So then they make that judgment, oh, it doesn't work. You have to think about who's saying it, really. It comes down to that. Okay, this person has this comment, and why are they saying it that way? Is it true or not? Or is it just their experience? I think that's a valid thing to think about. But there are a lot of different ways to find someone, and those are just a few that I would consider and suggest.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a couple more, and then we may have someone, if you're okay with it, if you can spend like a couple minutes where they may want to jump on and elaborate further. Figure we maybe knock out a few more questions if you're okay with that first.
I am happy to do that. I do want to ask you this though. Have you put the link in by chance
I
to
have,
the?
and I'll toss it
Okay,
in
good.
again right at the end as well.
Just want to make sure. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
absolutely. So next question is, how much do you recommend rely on social media, Instagram, book talk, hashtags? Are these highly recommended?
This is such a good question because it's always in the conversation. It's always in the conversation. So there are many who still say you have to have a big following. You have to have a big following on social media. You have to have a big whatever. People have to know. You have to be out. And to a certain extent, yes, it's great to have a following. It doesn't always lead to book sales, because I'm just going to say that. It doesn't always lead to book sales. It's good to have. It looks good. Oh, they have a lot of people who are interested in them. It looks good. But you know what? You can still sell a heck of a lot of books if you speak and you're out and you're doing things that way. Yes, it's important. You need to have hashtags. If people search online now, if they hear of your book or they hear of you or they're looking up your topic, you want to come up in some way. You want to be there. You want to come up. Yes. You need a presence. Yes. Yes. You must have a website. I probably don't even need to say that at this point. I'm thinking you have to have a website. So all that's important. The question always is, with all the social media posting, because some people put a lot of time into this. I mean, a lot of time. And when you hire a social media person, that's quite expensive too. And it doesn't always lead to sales. That's what I see. So presence is important. Visibility is important. I do think you need to be in these places and actually selling the book is what you want to do. That's the next important thing. And it doesn't always lead to that. You have a great audience. So you got to figure out a way. How do I sell this book?
Thank you. So
That's
next
sort of a
question is,
long-winded answer, wasn't it? That was a long-winded answer. I'm sorry about that.
So next question is, if you know you will want to speak to a group, does a publicity person help craft the speech?
Sometimes some, but it's not generally, for a book publicist, that's not generally what they would do. Generally speaking, some might. And they would probably help you with it, but not necessarily craft it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Next question is, does your class pertain equally to traditionally published books and self-published books?
Yes. 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 Because either way that you go, you're still going to have, the key messages and how to pitch and how to, all that. Yes. To both. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
So the final question that we have, is there a place like Glassdoor or something for the author world where you can find comparables for compensation?
For publicists, not that I'm aware of. It runs the gamut so much, I can't even believe it. If you had a question, if you send me an email sometime, if you're talking to someone, if you want to run that by me, I'm happy to respond to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
This is so much fun. I love doing this. I'm so glad you guys showed up. Oh, I just opened the chat. Lots of questions in here. This is good. Good. Social media. Yeah. Book talk. Back to Rachel and her question. Book talk is big. A lot of people are getting some good results with that. I just think it always comes down to your time and whatever results you get from it. And that's always a question, isn't it? But I've seen some people be very successful with book talk. And then media sees them too. And sometimes that's how they get on shows is by being on social media. So that can be very helpful.
But then other than that, I think we have it all covered. I'm going to drop the link again in there for the master course.
Now remember, If you sign up before midnight, you get the book. Yay. So that'll be fun. I'll send you one. Well, this is great. I just want to thank everybody for taking their time to come here today. I hope that was fruitful. You can always send me a note if you have a follow-up question. You have anything to add, Caitlin?
I think that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, Joanne. It's great as always.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It was a real joy. Thanks, everybody.
Perfect.
Hope to
Have a
see
good
you.
day,
Come
everyone.
join me. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this webinar hosted by the Nonfiction Authors Association. Members enjoy full access to replays of all of our educational webinars and many other benefits. Not a member yet? Think about it. We offer tremendous support, guidance, educational resources, courses, free reports, and a welcoming community for you, wherever you are in your writing and publishing process. We also produce the annual Nonfiction Writers Conference, offered entirely online since 2010. Find out more about the NFAA and how to join at nonfictionauthorsassociation.com.